The gavel didn't bang. It hovered like an executioner's axe. In the hallowed, mahogany-panelled halls of the Manhattan Supreme Court, a silence heavier than lead descended upon the gallery. Avery Wellington, the 90-year-old titan of industry, sat slumped in his wheelchair, looking smaller than anyone had ever seen him. He was alone. His lawyer, the man paid millions to protect him, had just walked out the double doors, leaving the billionaire to the wolves. The judge opened her mouth to issue a default judgment that would strip the old man of his freedom and his fortune. But then, a screech of a chair against the floor shattered the quiet. A young woman in a stained waitress uniform stood up in the back row. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steel. "Your Honor, wait! I will defend him!" The neon sign of Jerry's 24-hour diner buzzed with the irritating hum of a dying fly, flickering against the relentless Chicago rain. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee, bacon grease, and despair. It was 2:00 a.m. on a Tuesday, the graveyard shift, and Stacy Poole was exhausted. Stacy was 24, with dark circles under her eyes that no amount of cheap concealer could hide. She wiped down the laminate counter, her mind doing the frantic arithmetic of poverty. Rent was due in 3 days. Her father's insulin prescription was up $50 again. She was short by $200. "Refill sweet cheeks," a voice grunted from booth 4. Stacy gritted her teeth, forced a smile, and walked over with the pot. "Coming right up, Mr. Henderson." The diner was mostly empty, save for the drunk truck drivers, the insomniacs, and him. He sat in the corner booth, furthest from the door, wrapped in a coat that had seen better decades. He wore a tweed newsboy cap pulled low over grey, bushy eyebrows. His hands, spotted with age and trembling slightly, cradled a cup of hot water with lemon. He never ordered food. He couldn't afford it, or so Stacy thought. Everyone called him Old Artie. "Hey, Artie," Stacy said softly, approaching his table after dealing with Henderson. She slid a plate of blueberry pancakes onto the table. Cook made an extra batch. Accidental. "Can't sell 'em. You want 'em?" It was a lie. Stacy had paid for them out of her tips. She did this 3 times a week. The old man looked up. His eyes were a startling, piercing blue, surprisingly sharp amidst the wrinkles of his face. "You're a terrible liar, Stacy," he rasped, his voice sounding like gravel crunching under tires. But he pulled the plate closer. "Thank you." "Profound logic puzzles you're working on?" she asked, nodding at the tattered leather notebook open in front of him. It was filled with sketches, complex equations, and grids that looked like Sudoku on steroids. "Just keeping the rust off the gears," Artie mumbled, picking up his fork. "The mind is a fortress, Stacy. If you don't patrol the walls, the enemy gets in." "I hear that," she sighed, rubbing her neck. "My enemy is named student loans. I dropped out of Georgetown law 2 years ago, and the interest is still eating me alive." Artie paused, a piece of pancake halfway to his mouth. "Georgetown? You studied law?" "Top of my class for a semester," she said, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Then Dad got sick. Private care costs money. Waitressing pays cash. End of story." "The law is a tool," Artie said, his tone suddenly shifting. He didn't sound like a homeless man anymore. He sounded like a professor. "It is not about justice. It is about leverage. Never forget that." Before Stacy could respond, the bell above the door jingled aggressively. A group of 3 men in expensive tailored suits walked in. They brought the scent of expensive cologne and rain with them. They looked out of place in Jerry's, predators entering a petting zoo. They sat in a booth near Artie. The leader, a man with slicked-back blonde hair and a face that looked like it had been surgically tightened, snapped his fingers. "Coffee, black, and make sure the cups are clean," the man barked. Stacy stiffened. She recognized the type. Wall Street boys slumming it after a bender. She poured the coffee. As she walked past Artie's table, The blond man noticed the old man slurping his coffee. "Christ," the man sneered, loud enough for the whole diner to hear. "Does this place let just any vagrant in? It smells like wet dog over here." Artie didn't flinch. He just kept writing in his notebook. "Hey, Grandpa," the man shouted. "Why don't you take your trash outside? You're ruining my appetite." Stacy slammed the coffee pot down on the counter. The noise silenced the room. She walked over to the suits. "Sir, keep your voice down. He's a paying customer." The man laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. "Paying? Look at him. He's wearing rags. I bet he's paying in buttons." He turned to Artie. "How much to make you leave, old man? $20? He crumpled a $20 bill and threw it. It landed in Artie's pancakes. Artie slowly placed his fork down. He looked at the money, then at the man. "Grant," Artie said. His voice was barely a whisper, but it carried a strange weight. "You always were gauche with money." The blond man, Grant, froze. He squinted at the old man in the dim light. "Do I know you?" "Leave him alone," Stacy interjected, stepping between them. She was 5'4", but she stood like a linebacker. "Touch him again, and I'm calling the cops. I don't care how expensive your suit is." Grant looked at Stacy, sneering. "You're protecting a bum? You're pathetic." He stood up, towering over her. "Let's go, boys. This place is a dump." As they brushed past, Grant kicked Artie's cane, sending it skittering across the floor. "Oops." They left, laughing. Stacy rushed to pick up the cane. She was shaking with rage. "I'm so sorry, Artie. I should have thrown them out." Artie was staring at the door, his eyes cold and hard. He took the $20 bill out of his pancakes, wiped it off with a napkin, and handed it to Stacy. "Take this. For your father's medicine." "I can't." "Take it," he commanded. Then he closed his notebook. "Stacy, you have a good heart. But a good heart is a heavy burden in a courtroom. If you ever go back to law, remember, evidence is king, but perception is God." He stood up, looking frailer than usual. "I won't be coming in for a while." "Why?" Stacy asked, feeling a sudden pang of worry. "I have some family business to attend to. The wolves are circling." He handed her the notebook. "Keep this for me. Don't let anyone see it, especially men who look like the one who was just here." "Artie, what is this?" "Insurance," he said. And then he walked out into the rain. 3 days passed. Artie didn't show up. Stacy kept the leather notebook in her locker, wrapped in a plastic bag. She hadn't opened it. She respected his privacy. On the 4th day, the diner's old television, usually tuned to sports, was on the national news. Stacy was refilling salt shakers when the headline made her drop the container. Glass shattered, spilling salt everywhere. "Billionaire Avery Wellington declared incompetent. Family seeks control of empire." The screen showed a photo of a younger, vibrant man in a tuxedo. It was decades old, but the eyes were unmistakable. Those piercing blue eyes. "Oh my God," Stacy whispered. "Artie." The news anchor continued. "Avery Wellington, the recluse founder of Wellington Aerospace and Tech, has not been seen in public for years. Today, his nephew, Grant Wellington, filed an emergency motion to assume power of attorney and control over the $50 billion Wellington estate. Grant alleges that his uncle is suffering from advanced dementia and is a danger to himself. A hearing is scheduled for tomorrow at the Supreme Court." The screen cut to a clip of Grant Wellington holding a press conference. It was the blond man from the diner. "It breaks my heart," Grant said to the cameras, looking somber. "Uncle Avery is wandering the streets. He's confused. He doesn't know who he is. We just want to bring him home and protect him." "Liar!" Stacy shouted at the TV. "He knows exactly who he is." Her manager, Jerry, poked his head out. "Stacy, quit yelling at the TV and clean up that salt." Stacy ignored him. Her mind was racing. That man, Grant, wasn't trying to protect Artie. He was trying to steal the company, and he had kicked Artie's cane. He had treated him like garbage because he didn't recognize him in the dim light, or maybe he did, and he just enjoyed the cruelty. She thought of the notebook in her locker. Insurance. She ran to the back, grabbed the notebook and opened it. It wasn't just sketches. It was a diary. Entry, October 12th. Grant came to the brownstone today, threatened to cut off my access to the R&D lab if I didn't sign over the voting shares. He thinks I'm senile because I prefer the company of pigeons to board members. I played the fool. Let him think the lion is toothless. Entry, November the 1st. I've finalized the designs for the Helios clean energy thruster. It works. The math is perfect. If Grant gets control, he'll sell the patent to foreign oil interests to bury it. I must protect the work. Stacy flipped through the pages. It was all there. Lucid, brilliant, and heartbreakingly sharp. This wasn't the writing of a man with dementia. This was the writing of a genius playing a long game. But why did he give it to her? Because he knew. He knew they were coming for him. Stacy looked at the clock. Her shift wasn't over for 4 hours. "Jerry!" she yelled. "I quit!" "What?" Jerry waddled out of the kitchen. "You can't quit! You need this job!" "I need to be somewhere else," she said, ripping off her apron. She grabbed her coat and ran out the door. She had to get to the courthouse. But first, she needed to look the part. She couldn't walk into the Supreme Court in a grease-stained uniform. She ran home, dug through her closet, and found the one suit she had kept from her days at Georgetown. It was slightly tight and smelled of mothballs, but it was charcoal grey and professional. She spent the last of her money on a cab to the detention center, where the news said Avery was being held for his own safety. But the guards turned her away. "Family and legal counsel only," the guard said, bored. "I have evidence relevant to his case," Stacy pleaded. "Tell it to the judge, tomorrow. Now move along." She didn't sleep that night. She sat up reading the notebook, understanding the scope of what was happening. Grant Wellington wasn't just stealing money. He was dismantling a legacy. The courtroom was freezing. The air conditioning hummed aggressively, battling the humidity of the crowded room. Reporters packed the benches. This was the trial of the decade. Stacy sat in the very back row, clutching the notebook to her chest. She felt small. The room was filled with men in $5,000 suits. Avery Wellington was wheeled in. He looked terrible. They had dressed him in a hospital gown and a loose cardigan, making him look frail. He was sedated, his head lolled to the side. He didn't look like the sharp man from the diner. He looked exactly like what Grant wanted him to look like. A vegetable. Grant sat at the plaintiff's table, looking sorrowful and concerned. Beside him was a team of 4 lawyers. At the defense table, sitting next to Avery, was a single man, Preston Bailey. Stacy knew the name. Preston Bailey was a legendary defense attorney. He charged $1,000 an hour. He was known as the Teflon Wall. If anyone could save Avery, it was him. Stacy felt a wave of relief. Maybe she didn't need to do anything. Maybe Bailey had this handled. Judge Harriet Moore entered. She was a stern woman with glasses perched on the end of her nose. "All rise." The proceedings began. Grant's lawyer, a sharp-faced woman named Delilah Vance, painted a grim picture. She showed medical reports, signed by doctors on the Wellington payroll, Stacy guessed. She showed videos of Avery yelling at street signs, taken out of context, Stacy was sure. "Your Honor," Vance said smoothly. "Mr. Wellington is a danger to himself. He was found wandering the slums of Chicago, eating out of garbage cans. He has no recollection of his assets. For the safety of the company that employs thousands, and for his own dignity, guardianship must be granted to his only living relative, Grant Wellington." Judge Moore looked at the defense table. "Mr. Bailey, your opening statement?" Preston Bailey stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He looked at Grant, and for a split second, Stacy saw a nod pass between them. A chill ran down her spine. "Your Honor," Bailey began, his voice smooth. "I have reviewed the evidence presented by the plaintiff." He paused. He looked down at Avery, who was blinking groggily. "And?" Judge Moore asked. "And," Bailey continued, "I find myself in a difficult ethical position. As an officer of the court, I cannot in good faith argue against the medical evidence. It appears irrefutable." The courtroom gasped. A murmur rippled through the crowd like a wave. "Are you saying you are conceding the motion?" Judge Moore asked, shocked. "I am saying," Bailey said, loud and clear, "that my client is clearly mentally incapacitated. To drag this out would be a disservice to the court and to Mr. Wellington's remaining dignity. I withdraw my objection to the guardianship." Stacy's blood turned to ice. It was a setup. Bailey had been bought. He wasn't there to defend Avery. He was there to make the surrender look legal. Avery lifted his head. He tried to speak, but his words were slurred. Traitor!" "Sit down, Avery," Bailey whispered, patting his shoulder with fake affection. "It's over." Judge Moore sighed, picking up her gavel. "Very well. If there is no defense mounted, and given the weight of the medical evidence, I am prepared to rule. I hereby find Avery Wellington mentally incompetent and appoint." Stacy's heart hammered against her ribs. If that gavel fell, it was over. The notebook, the truth, the life of the only man who had treated her with kindness in years, all gone. She remembered Artie's words. The law is not about justice, it is about leverage. She didn't think. She moved. "Wait!" The scream tore through the courtroom. Stacy stood up, knocking her heavy bag over. Every head turned to look at her. Judge Moore frowned, her gavel hovering inches from the block. "Order. Who is that?" Stacy scrambled over the legs of the reporters in her row. She marched into the aisle. "You can't do this. He's lying. That lawyer is lying." "Bailiff!" Judge Moore barked. "Remove this woman." Two large officers started toward her. "I have evidence," Stacy shouted, holding up the leather notebook. "I have proof that Avery Wellington is sane, and I have proof that Grant Wellington committed fraud." Grant shot up from his seat. "Who is this lunatic? Get her out of here." "I am not a lunatic," Stacy said, her voice shaking but gaining volume. She looked directly at Avery. His eyes met hers. Through the sedation, a spark of recognition flared. "I'm his friend," Stacy said. She looked at the judge. "And since his lawyer just abandoned him, he has no counsel. Under the Sixth Amendment, he has a right to an effective defense. Bailey just admitted he won't give it." Stacy took a deep breath. She stepped past the bar, into the well of the court. "I'm Stacy Poole. I'm a waitress, but I studied law, and I am asking the court for permission to speak as amicus curiae, a friend of the court. Or if you won't allow that, then let Mr. Wellington fire this traitor and hire me." Preston Bailey laughed. "Hire you? You're a nobody." Stacy turned to Bailey. "I'm the nobody who knows what you did." The courtroom was dead silent. Judge Moore looked at Stacy, then at the trembling Avery, and finally at the smug face of Grant Wellington. She slowly lowered the gavel, but didn't strike it. "Approach the bench," the judge said. "Now." The distance from the gallery to the judge's bench was only 20 feet, but for Stacy, it felt like crossing a minefield. She could feel the eyes of the entire courtroom boring into her back, the reporters, the curious onlookers, and the burning, hateful glare of Grant Wellington. She arrived at the bench, breathless. Preston Bailey, the traitorous lawyer, was already there, leaning close to Judge Moore. He smelled of peppermint and arrogance. "Your Honor," Bailey said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "This is absurd. The woman is clearly disturbed, a fan, perhaps, or a stalker. I move to have her removed immediately so we can conclude this tragic business." Judge Moore peered over her spectacles at Stacy. "Young woman, you have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't hold you in contempt of court. You are not a member of the bar." "No, Your Honor," Stacy said, her hands gripping the edge of the mahogany bench to stop them from shaking. "I'm not. But I know that Rule 1.7 of the Rules of Professional Conduct states a lawyer cannot represent a client if there is a concurrent conflict of interest." Bailey scoffed. "And where is the conflict? I am acting in Mr. Wellington's best interests." "Are you?" Stacy shot back. She slammed the leather notebook onto the judge's bench. "This is Avery's diary, dated 3 days ago. In it, he details a meeting where you, Mr. Bailey, met with Grant Wellington at a private club called the Onyx Room. Avery hired a private investigator before he was taken. He knew you were selling him out." Bailey's face went pale. That is hearsay. It's the scribblings of a madman." "Is it?" Stacy opened the book to a marked page. "If he's a madman, how did he know you deposited a retainer of $2 million into your offshore account in the Caymans yesterday? He predicted it. He wrote, 'Bailey will take the silver. The price is usually $2 million. Judge Moore's eyes widened. She snatched the notebook and scanned the page. The handwriting was shaky but legible. The logic was sound. "This is ridiculous," Bailey sputtered. "I demand—" "Quiet," Judge Moore snapped. She looked at Stacy. "You claim he is sane?" "I claim he is drugged," Stacy said fiercely. "Look at him. He's drooling. When he comes into my diner, he does cryptic crosswords in pen. He recites poetry. He is old, yes. But he is not gone. They have sedated him to make him look incompetent, so they can steal his company." The judge looked past them at Avery Wellington. The old man was slumped in his wheelchair, but his eyes were fixed on Stacy. He raised one trembling hand and gave a thumbs up. It was weak, but deliberate. "Mr. Bailey," Judge Moore said, her voice icy. "Step back. Your Honor, step back." The judge leaned over her bench, addressing the court. "The court will take a 10-minute recess. I want the court medic to examine the defendant immediately. And Mr. Wellington." She looked at the billionaire. "Can you speak?" Avery cleared his throat. It sounded like a rusty engine turning over. Fire. Him." He pointed a shaking finger at Bailey. A gasp went through the courtroom. "The defendant has terminated his counsel," Judge Moore announced. "Mr. Wellington, do you wish to hire new counsel?" Avery looked at the suits in the room. He shook his head. Then he looked at Stacy. "Her. She is not a lawyer, Mr. Wellington," the judge said gently. "I represent myself," Avery rasped, struggling to get the words out through the fog of sedatives. "Pro se. She is my voice. My hands." Judge Moore pursed her lips. It was highly irregular. But the accusation of fraud against Bailey was serious, and the man's rights were at stake. "Very well. The court recognizes Avery Wellington as representing himself pro se. Ms. Poole may assist him as a Mackenzie friend. She may organize documents and take notes, and given the defendant's physical frailty, I will allow her to read his statements for the record. But she cannot argue the law." It was a loophole, but it was enough. "Thank you, Your Honor," Stacy breathed. Grant Wellington stood up, his face red. "This is a farce. My uncle is being manipulated by a waitress. Look at her suit. It's cheap polyester." "Sit down, Mr. Wellington." Judge Moore banged her gavel. "Or I will have you removed." The recess was a whirlwind. The court medic confirmed that Avery's pupils were sluggish and his heart rate suppressed, signs of heavy sedation. The judge ordered that no more medication be administered. When court reconvened, Stacy rolled Avery's wheelchair to the defense table. Bailey was gone, having fled the building. It was just Stacy and Avery against Grant's remaining legal team, led by Delilah, a woman with eyes like a shark and a smile like a trap. "Miss Poole," Avery whispered. He sounded slightly stronger now that the shock of the moment had passed. "You have... the book?" "I have it, Artie," she whispered back. "We're going to fight." "The first witness," Judge Moore called. Delilah stood up. "The plaintiff calls Dr. Aris Kovacs." A tall, thin man with a goatee and wire-rimmed glasses took the stand. He wore a white coat, which Stacy thought was a bit theatrical for a courtroom. "Dr. Kovacs," Delilah began, pacing in front of the jury box. Though there was no jury, she performed for the press. "You are Mr. Wellington's personal physician?" "I am. Can you describe his condition?" "Tragic," Dr. Kovacs sighed. "Advanced Alzheimer's mixed with paranoid delusions. He believes he is inventing technology that defies the laws of physics. He forgets where he is. He speaks to people who aren't there." "And in your professional opinion, is he capable of managing his own finances?" "Absolutely not. He would give away his fortune to the first pigeon he saw." Grant smirked from his table. "Thank you, Doctor." Delilah sat down. Stacy felt a tug on her sleeve. Avery handed her a sticky note. On it, he had written, "Ask about the dosage." Stacy stood up. Her legs felt like jelly. She walked to the podium. "Dr. Kovacs," Stacy said. Her voice cracked. She cleared her throat and tried again, channeling the anger she felt when Grant kicked the cane. "Dr. Kovacs, you prescribed the medication Mr. Wellington is currently on?" "I did," Kovacs said, looking down his nose at her. "To manage his anxiety and outbursts." "What is the medication?" "Haloperidol, a standard antipsychotic." Stacy flipped through the notebook. She found a page where Artie had written down the names of the pills they forced him to take. "And the dosage?" 5 milligrams twice a day. Stacy looked at the judge. "Your Honor, I have a copy of the physician's desk reference here." She pulled a heavy book out of her bag. She had grabbed it from the court library during recess. "For a man of 90 years old, weighing 140 pounds, the recommended geriatric dose is 0.5 milligrams. You have him on 10 times the recommended amount," the courtroom murmured. "That is a therapeutic dose for his level of aggression," Kovacs stammered. "Aggression?" Stacy asked. "Or was it to keep him quiet? Because 10 milligrams of haloperidol would make a linebacker comatose, let alone a 90-year-old man." "I am the doctor here," Kovacs snapped. "And you said he has delusions," Stacy pressed on, ignoring his outburst. "You said he invents technology that defies physics. Can you give an example?" "Yes," Kovacs scoffed. "He draws scribbles of what he calls a Helios thruster. He claims it uses ionized particles to create thrust without fuel. It's science fiction. It's the rambling of a child." Stacy turned to Avery. He nodded. She picked up the leather notebook. "Your Honor, the defendant would like to enter Exhibit A, the notebook." She walked the notebook to the witness stand. "Dr. Kovacs, is this the scribble you are referring to?" She opened it to a centerfold page. It was a dense, incredibly detailed schematic. It didn't look like a scribble. It looked like a blueprint for a NASA engine. "Yes, that's the nonsense," Kovacs said dismissively. "Read the equation at the bottom," Stacy commanded. I am a medical doctor, not a physicist." "Then I will read it," Stacy said. She turned to the gallery. "This isn't nonsense. This is the Wellington equation for ionized propulsion. And..." She paused for effect. "It was patented yesterday." Grant's head snapped up. "What?" Delilah stood up. "Objection. I filed it myself." Stacy lied. Well, half lied. She had mailed the application forms she found in the back of the notebook during the lunch break recess, using the court's own post office. The patent office accepted the preliminary filing this morning. If this is the work of a madman, then the U.S. Patent Office is insane, too. This proves Mr. Wellington is capable of complex, high-level cognitive function. She turned back to the doctor. So, Dr. Kovacs, either you are incompetent and can't recognize a genius invention, or you are lying to help Grant Wellington steal a billion-dollar idea. Which is it? Kovacs looked at Grant. Grant's face was purple with rage. No further questions, Stacy said, slamming the book shut. The momentum had shifted. You could feel it in the air. The reporters were typing furiously on their laptops. Waitress destroys doctor. Billionaire genius or senile old man. Judge Moore looked at Grant's table. Call your next witness. Delilah looked nervous. She whispered something to Grant. Grant shook his head violently and pointed at the stand. He stood up. I will testify, Grant announced. He walked to the stand with the swagger of a man who owned the building. He adjusted his silk tie and sat down. Delilah guided him through the soft questions. Mr. Wellington, tell us why you filed this motion. I love my uncle, Grant said, managing to squeeze out a single, fake tear. It hurts me to see him like this. This woman, this waitress, she's taking advantage of him. She's probably sleeping with him for money. Objection, Stacy shouted, forgetting she wasn't technically the lawyer. Sustained, Judge Moore said, glaring at Grant. Watch your mouth, Mr. Wellington. I'm just saying, Grant continued, smooth as oil. Uncle Avery isn't well. He fired the board of directors last month because he said they were soulless suits. He's destroying the company's stock. We need stability. I am simply trying to save the family legacy. Thank you, Grant, Delilah said. Your witness, Ms. Poole. Stacy approached the stand. She knew this was the boss fight. Grant was smarter than the doctor. He was a manipulator. Mr. Wellington, Stacy said, you claim you want to save the company? It's my life's work. Your life's work? Stacy raised an eyebrow. According to the public records, you have never held an official job at Wellington Tech. You are a consultant. What exactly do you consult on? I advise on strategic direction. Strategic direction, Stacy repeated. She walked back to Avery's table and picked up a stack of papers. These weren't from the notebook. These were from her own pocket. The research she had done on her phone in the hallway. Is it true, Mr. Wellington, that you personally owe $40 million to the Kruger Syndicate in gambling debts? Grant froze. That is preposterous. I have a credit report here from a dark web audit, Stacy said. Okay, maybe not admissible, she muttered to herself. But let's try this. She swapped the paper for the notebook. Let's stick to the diary. Entry dated August 4th. Grant asked for a loan again. $40 million. He says the Russians are going to break his legs. I told him no. He screamed that he would bury me. Stacy looked up. Did you threaten to bury your uncle if he didn't pay your gambling debts? No, Grant shouted. He's hallucinating. He's lying. Is he? Stacy pressed. Because 3 days after that entry, you filed for guardianship. The timing is very convenient. You get control of the estate, you pay off your debts, and you sell the Helios patent to the highest bidder. You little... Grant stood up, his fists clenched. You have no idea who you are messing with. I will ruin you. I will have you back scrubbing toilets where you belong. Mr. Wellington, Judge Moore barked, sit down. But Grant was losing his cool. He's a senile old bat. He doesn't deserve that money. I've waited 50 years for him to die, and he just keeps living. He spends it on charity and research while I starve. You starve in a penthouse on Park Avenue? Stacy asked dryly. It's not enough, Grant screamed. It's never enough. Silence rang through the courtroom. Grant realized what he had said. He slowly sat back down, adjusting his cuffs, his face pale. Stacy looked at the judge. I think the witness has made his motivations clear, Your Honor. She turned to go back to her seat, feeling a surge of triumph. But as she passed the plaintiff's table, Delilah stood up. She held a manila folder. She looked smug. "Your Honor," Delilah said, her voice cutting through the silence. "Before we dismiss the witness, I have some evidence regarding the character of the Mackenzie friend, Miss Poole." Stacy froze. "This is a custody hearing," Delilah said. "The character of the proposed guardian or aide is relevant. Miss Poole claims to be a noble protector. But isn't it true, Miss Poole, that you didn't just drop out of Georgetown law?" Delilah opened the folder. "Isn't it true you were expelled?" Stacy's heart stopped. She turned slowly. "And isn't it true," Delilah continued, holding up a police report, "that you were expelled for theft, specifically stealing funds from the Student Legal Aid Clinic?" The gallery gasped. Avery looked at Stacy, confusion clouding his eyes. "No," Stacy whispered. "That's not true. I didn't steal it. I was framed." "Framed?" Delilah laughed. "Just like Avery is framed. It seems you attract conspiracies, Miss Poole. Your Honor, this woman is a proven thief. She cannot be allowed near Mr. Wellington's estate. She is clearly a grifter who saw a vulnerable billionaire and latched on." Judge Moore looked at Stacy with disappointment. "Miss Poole, is this true? Were you expelled for theft?" Stacy couldn't breathe. It was the secret she had buried. She had taken the fall for her ex-boyfriend, a rich kid named Caleb. Wait, Caleb is banned. A rich kid named Brody, who had actually stolen the money. If she had ratted him out, his powerful father would have destroyed her father's healthcare access. So she took the blame. But she couldn't explain that now. It would sound like another lie. Stacy stammered. "The silence is deafening," Delilah said triumphantly. "We move to have her removed from the court and arrested for attempting to defraud a vulnerable adult." Grant was smiling again. The shark had bitten back. Avery looked at Stacy. His blue eyes were searching hers. He looked at the notebook in her hand, then at her face. He saw the shame. But then he saw something else. He saw the grease stain on her sleeve from the diner. He saw the $20 bill she had tried to refuse. Avery Wellington, for the first time in years, sat up straight without the help of the chair. He pushed himself up. His legs shook, but he stood. "No," Avery said. His voice was no longer a rasp. It was a boom. "Avery," Grant whispered, shocked. "She did not steal from me," Avery said, his voice filling the room. "And she will not be removed." He looked at the judge. "I may be old, Harriet. I may be tired. But I know a thief when I see one." He pointed at Grant. "And I know a hero when I see one." He put a hand on Stacy's shoulder. "But we have a problem," Avery said, looking at Delilah. "You want to talk about the past. Let's talk about the past." Avery reached into his cardigan pocket. He pulled out not a notebook, but a small digital voice recorder. It was ancient, a relic from the 90s, but the red light was blinking. "I've been recording," Avery said with a mischievous grin, "since I came into this room. And I think I just recorded my nephew admitting he wants me dead." "Objection!" Delilah shrieked. "Illegal wiretap!" "Actually," Stacy said, her mind racing back to her law classes, finding her footing again, "New York is a one-party consent state. As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal." Avery knew. Judge Moore banged her gavel, hiding a smile. "Overruled. Play the tape." The courtroom was so quiet, you could hear the hum of the hard drives in the stenographer's machine. Avery Wellington held the small plastic recorder like it was a holy relic. His hand, usually shaking with age, was steady now, anchored by adrenaline and rage. "Play it," Judge Moore ordered, leaning forward. Avery pressed the button. A burst of static crackled through the room, followed by the unmistakable sound of a heavy door closing. Then, voices. Clear, distinct, and damning. Voice 1, Grant. "Is he out?" Voice 2, Dr. Kovacs. "He's under. I gave him the double dose like you asked. But Grant, this is dangerous. At his age, respiratory failure is a real risk. If he dies... Voice 1. Grant. If he dies, the probate court hands me the keys even faster. Just keep him zombified until Friday. Once the judge signs that competency order, I'll ship him off to that facility in Switzerland. They don't ask questions there. Voice 3. Bailey, the first lawyer. And the money? My wire transfer hasn't cleared. Voice 1. Grant. Relax, Bailey. Once I liquidate the R&D division, you'll get your $2 million. Just make sure you tank the defense. If he tries to speak, object to everything. Click. The recording ended. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. It was the sound of a conspiracy shattering in real time. Stacy looked at Dr. Kovacs. The arrogant doctor was gripping the railing of the witness stand, his knuckles white, sweat beading on his forehead. He looked like a trapped animal. She looked at Grant. He wasn't sweating. He was staring at the table, his jaw clenched so hard, a vein throbbed in his temple. Dr. Kovacs, Stacy said, her voice ringing out clearly. She didn't need to shout any more. The truth was loud enough. Did you or did you not administer a potentially lethal dose of haloperidol to facilitate a hostile takeover of the Wellington estate? I was pressured, Kovacs blurted out, pointing a shaking finger at Grant. He threatened to ruin my practice. He said he'd expose my malpractice suit from 2018. I had no choice. You always have a choice, Doctor, Stacy said coldly, and you chose the money. Objection! Delilah screamed, jumping up. She looked desperate. This tape is inadmissible. There is no chain of custody. Mr. Wellington could have doctored it. It's digital manipulation. Judge Moore slowly turned her head to look at Delilah. The look was withering. Ms. Sharp, the judge said, using the lawyer's surname. You are treading on very thin ice. Your client has just been implicated in conspiracy, assault, and attempted murder. Unless you want to be joined as a co-conspirator, I suggest you sit down and be quiet. Delilah's mouth opened, then closed. She sat down, moving her chair visibly away from Grant. Stacy turned to the judge. Your Honor, based on this recording and the testimony of the doctor, I move for immediate dismissal of the guardianship petition. Furthermore, I request a protective order for Avery Wellington against Grant Wellington. Granted, Judge Moore said instantly. And I am going further. Bailiff, secure the courtroom doors. No one leaves. Grant finally looked up. His eyes were dead, void of any emotion. He slowly stood up. Sit down, Mr. Wellington, the bailiff shouted, hand on his taser. It doesn't matter, Grant said, adjusting his tie. He looked at Avery with a chilling calmness. You think you won, old man? You think this waitress can save you? Grant reached into his inner suit jacket pocket. Gun! A reporter screamed. Panic erupted. The gallery scrambled. Stacy didn't think. She threw herself in front of Avery's wheelchair. But Grant didn't pull a gun. He pulled out a phone. He tapped the screen once. It's done, Grant said, smiling. I just transferred the offshore liquidity. The Cayman accounts are empty. The company accounts are draining as we speak. Even if I go to jail, Avery, you're broke. I win. He dropped the phone on the floor and crushed it with his heel. The Wellington Empire is dust. Avery looked at his nephew. He didn't look scared. He looked disappointed. Stacy, Avery said gently, tapping her on the shoulder where she was shielding him. Let me speak to the boy. Stacy moved aside, but stayed close, ready to fight. Grant, Avery said, his voice raspy, but carrying to the back of the room. You were always bad at math. You forgot the first rule of business. And what's that? Grant sneered. Greed is good? No, Avery said. Diversification. Avery looked at Stacy. The notebook, please. Page 88. Stacy opened the leather diary. She found page 88. It wasn't a schematic. It was a list of numbers, blockchains. "Read it, Stacy." It looks like a crypto wallet key," Stacy said, frowning. "And a list of shell companies?" "Grant?" Avery continued. "Did you really think I kept my money in the accounts you had access to? I knew you were stealing from me 5 years ago. I let you take the crumbs while I moved the feast." Avery leaned forward. "The accounts you just drained were decoys. They held about $500 and a subscription to National Geographic. My fortune, the real fortune, is in a blind trust managed by an entity you've never heard of." Grant's face went from smug to ghostly white in a second. "What? That's impossible. I saw the statements." "You saw what I wanted you to see," Avery said. "The Kruger Syndicate you owe money to. Who do you think owns the debt?" Grant froze. No, that's—" "I bought your debt last week," Avery said, "through a subsidiary. Which means, Grant, you don't owe the Russian mob $40 million. You owe me." The courtroom gasped. Even the judge looked stunned. The senile old man had outplayed everyone. He hadn't just defended himself, he had bought the battlefield. "And," Avery added, his eyes hardening, "I am calling in the debt immediately." Grant's knees gave out. He collapsed into his chair, a broken man. Judge Moore banged her gavel. It sounded like a gunshot. "Officers, take Mr. Grant Wellington into custody. The charges are fraud, attempted grand larceny, and conspiracy to commit murder. And Dr. Kovacs as well." As the officers hauled a screaming Grant and a weeping Kovacs away, the courtroom erupted into chaos. Flashbulbs popped. Reporters shouted questions. But amidst the noise, Avery only looked at Stacy. He reached out and took her hand. His grip was frail, but warm. "You defended me," he whispered. "When my own blood tried to bleed me dry." "I just told the truth, Artie," Stacy said, tears stinging her eyes. "The truth is a rare commodity," Avery said. "Now let's get out of here. I'm craving pancakes." The aftermath of the trial was a media firestorm. The image of the waitress in the cheap suit, shielding the billionaire in the wheelchair, was plastered on every newspaper from New York to London. They called her the angel of the courtroom. But for Stacy, the reality was quieter. 2 weeks later, she was back at Jerry's diner. The rain was still falling in Chicago, turning the streets into slick mirrors, but the vibe inside was different. Jerry, her boss, was nervously polishing a glass. "You sure you don't want the day off, Stacy? There's a news van parked across the street." "I need the tips, Jerry," Stacy said, tying her apron. "Fame doesn't pay the rent." It was true. Despite the victory, her life hadn't magically transformed. The court case was over, but the legal wheels turned slowly. Avery was in a private hospital, getting detoxed from the heavy meds, surrounded by a new team of security guards who, politely, turned everyone away, even her. She hadn't seen him since the verdict. Doubt had started to creep in. Had he forgotten her? Was she just a tool he used to win, discarded now that he was safe? The bell above the door jingled. It wasn't a customer. It was a man in a black suit. Not a cheap suit like Grant's, but a bespoke Savile Row masterpiece. He carried a briefcase. "I am looking for Ms. Stacy Poole," the man said. "That's me," Stacy said, wiping her hands on a rag. "If this is about an interview, I'm not interested." "I am not a reporter," the man said with a slight bow. "My name is Walter Sterling." "Wait, Sterling is banned." "Correction. My name is Walter Bishop. I am the new chief legal officer for Wellington Industries." The diner went silent. Even the fry cook stopped scraping the griddle. "Mr. Wellington asked me to deliver this to you personally," Walter said. He placed a thick, cream-colored envelope on the counter. Stacy stared at it. "What is it?" "Open it." Stacy's trembling fingers broke the wax seal. She pulled out a document. It was a legal contract. Employment agreement role, Senior Vice President of Philanthropy and Special Legal Counsel. Starting salary, $350,000 per annum. Signing, bonus, $500,000. Stacy gasped, dropping the paper. I can't take this. I'm not even a lawyer. I got kicked out of school. Read the addendum, Walter said, a small smile playing on his lips. Stacy flipped the page. Addendum. Educational stipend. Wellington Industries will cover 100% of tuition and living expenses for the completion of Ms. Poole's Juris Doctor degree at the university of her choice. Addendum B. The Brody Clause. Stacy looked up. The Brody Clause? Walter nodded. Mr. Wellington has a very effective investigation team. They looked into your expulsion from Georgetown. They found the security footage from the dorms that was accidentally lost 3 years ago. It shows your ex-boyfriend, Brody, breaking into the clinic lockbox, not you. Stacy put a hand over her mouth. He found it? He did more than find it, Walter said. He sent it to the Dean of Georgetown Law. Your expulsion has been expunged. You are invited to return next semester, with a formal apology from the administration. Tears streamed down Stacy's face. The weight she had been carrying for 3 years, the shame, the lost potential, the feeling of being a failure, evaporated. Why? She whispered. Why would he do all this? Turn around, Walter said. Stacy turned. The door to the diner opened. Avery Wellington didn't walk in. He rolled in, but this time in a sleek, motorized chair. He was wearing a sharp navy suit, his hair trimmed, his face shaven. He looked 20 years younger. Hello, Stacy, he said. His voice was strong. Artie, she breathed. You look expensive. I feel expensive, he chuckled. He rolled up to the counter. I'll have the blueberry pancakes, and this time, I'm paying. Stacy laughed, a wet, choking sound of pure relief. You couldn't just call. I wanted to see your face, Avery said. He became serious. Stacy, you saved my life. You saved my legacy. But more importantly, you reminded me that the law is supposed to protect the weak, not just serve the strong. He pointed to the contract. I need you, Stacy. Not as a waitress, but as my conscience. I have a lot of money and not a lot of time left. I want to spend the rest of my days fixing things, and I need someone who isn't afraid to yell at me when I'm being an old fool. I'm pretty good at yelling, Stacy smiled, wiping her eyes. I know, Avery grinned. You have a terrifying objection voice. Stacy looked at the contract, then at the diner, then at Avery. She took off her apron. She folded it neatly and placed it on the counter. Jerry, she said over her shoulder. I think I'm putting in my 2 weeks' notice. Jerry grinned, giving her a thumbs up. About time, kid. Go get 'em. Stacy walked around the counter. She didn't shake Avery's hand. She hugged him. It was awkward with the wheelchair, but it was perfect. Thank you, she whispered. No, Avery said, patting her back. Thank you, counselor. And just like that, the waitress who served coffee to a homeless man ended up running a $1 billion foundation. It proves that character is the only currency that truly matters. Stacy didn't help Artie because he was rich. She helped him because it was right, and in the end, that integrity was worth more than any stock option. What did you think of the twist with the Kruger Syndicate debt? Did you expect Artie to be playing 4D chess the whole time? Let me know in the comments below. If this story moved you, please smash that like button and subscribe to the channel. We post incredible stories of justice and redemption every single week. Don't forget to hit the notification bell so you never miss a part. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to strangers. You never know who they really are.